It's pretty fascinating to see how much misery and settling and mediocrity we're willing to endure as long as we can maintain some level of certainty about our lives. There's this quote from Tim Ferris, amazing quote, kind of hit me right between the eyes, and it said, most people will choose unhappiness over uncertainty. Most people would rather be unhappy than to have to go through whatever it takes in that process of uncertainty to get what they want. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about that problem. It's something that we all deal with in different degrees and different contexts, and I'm going to give you some of my thoughts and insights on how to deal with that. But before we get to that, make sure that if you are on YouTube, you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're on any other platform like Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., use those tools to promote and share the video with your friends. So what's the big deal about dealing with uncertainty? Why do we have so much fear wrapped around some of the things that have uncertain and unpredictable outcomes, right? So if you look at some of the things that, people really aspire to do, some of the things that are very rarely done, say, starting a business, some project, you want to become a content creator, you want to start some organization, basically anything, a lot of the highest pursuits in life are things with undefined paths where you're going to have to go through some level of uncertainty to get them, right? So if you go to a job, you know exactly what to expect. When you live your day-to-day life, even if you don't like your life, you more or less know what to expect. But to step out of that and actually get what you really want and actually be happy, you have to face uncertainty, which is just in a lot of different ways very hard to deal with. It's hard to deal with because your brain is like this. It's this anticipation machine, right? So when you're anticipating something that you need to do, some uncertain future, you always visualize things going differently than they actually will happen in real life. So let's say you wanted to do something like start a business, whatever, right? You have all this anticipation about how difficult it's going to be, how you're going to feel if you get rejected, how you're going to have to go through all of these different steps. But if you actually were to ever get in the thick of doing it, you'd actually feel more or less okay throughout the process. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to feel good all the time. You will face rejection. You will have moments that are really, really tough to deal with. You will go through some level of psychological pain towards any long-term pursuit, right? But it's probably not going to be as terrifying as you make it up to be in your mind. So everyone basically has their answer to, the type of life that they would live if they had certainty that their actions would work out, right? We all have different areas of our life where if we knew that the outcomes we wanted were certain beforehand, we would go through that process and do them. But instead, we suffer from that fear of uncertainty. And one way to get over it is simply to understand that actually when you get in the thick of doing whatever it is that you feel uncertain about, things will start to click and things will get better in the future, right? So usually when you're trying to change your life in any sort of shape or form or facet, there's going to be a pain period, right? And there's going to be a period where you don't feel great about the results you're getting right away. When I first started putting together content and things like that, very few people read it. I did get some negative comments. People were mean to me from time to time. I did get rejections on a lot of my stuff that I tried to pitch to different editors and different websites. But it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was just a rough patch that I had to go through and get some growing pains to come out of the other side. So you are going to go through, some level of a pain period in whatever it is you're trying to pursue. But that pain period isn't going to last forever, and it's likely not going to be as bad as you think. That anticipation machine is just a mean little nasty bugger of self-talk that gets in your head. I've thought of so many situations where like the anticipation of the situation was so much worse and heightened than what actually happened. Like I remember one time that I asked my boss for a $10,000 raise, and I was like scared, shaking before I got in the office for whatever reason. I just felt nervous about asking for a raise. And then I went through, I had this big pitch, this big spiel about how I deserved the raise, blah, blah, blah. I had all these papers, charts. And then he basically looked at me, he's like, oh yeah, okay. Sounds good. you can have a raise. And I was like, what the heck? I spent all that time worrying about how I would feel when I would go to do the pitch. Then when I did the pitch, it wasn't that bad. So I know it's not much solace before you actually get into the act of doing whatever it is, but I guarantee you it's probably not going to be as bad as you think it is once you get into the thick of it. Another thing to consider that can help push you over the edge when it comes to facing uncertainty so that you can actually be happy is to think about your unhappiness with the things that are going on in your life and look at it in relation to your inability to face uncertainty, and kind of you got to drill that into your mind until you conjure up some level of motivation to get there, right? So all self-improvement does is give you like angles to think about things, and eventually you're going to have to make that leap yourself. But just one of the angles that you can use is like think about how much of your life, how many opportunities you miss out on simply because you're trying to avoid negative feelings. Think of how much of your life is oriented around your fear of rejection. Think of how much of your life is oriented around your fear of looking stupid. Think of how much of your life is oriented around the mental strain that comes from doing things that have, required delayed gratification. Like, think of just how much you're actually missing out on just because you don't want to go into the abyss and face something with an unknowable outcome. Like, you're giving up a lot. Like, you look at the way people live their lives, and it's everyone in different contexts and different shapes. But if you look at, people will literally work a job they hate, or not even that bad. You'll work a job that you just kind of sort of tolerate, but you'll waste a third of your life because that job is certain and that business you want to start isn't, right? You have people who settle in vast majority, many different areas of their life, from their career to their relationships to their health, everything, all because you just don't want to feel uncertain. And there's no magical recipe, but one way that can help is to think of how much things are costing you, right? So there's that famous Tony Robbins quote when he was like, when the pain of staying the same is stronger than the pain of changing, then you'll change. So one way to do that is to kind of actively think about that and kind of have a brutally honest self-assessment about all the opportunities and all the potential that you're leaving on the table just because you don't want to face uncertainty. It's difficult. I will make no bones about it. If this whole self-improvement thing was so easy, that not that many people, or a lot more people who would be executing it, right? I know that the vast majority of people who watch self-improvement content or have anything that they want to pursue, most of them do end up quitting because you have to go through so much trepidation in the process, right? So you have to figure out how you're going to somehow be the exception to that rule, and thinking about how much you're missing out on can really help. And then the last thing you can do, to help deal with uncertainty and risk and putting yourself out there and investing your time, maybe you're investing your money, you're investing your resources, you're investing into relationships, whatever it may be, it's good to have kind of the proper perspective of what life actually is, right? So, there's this famous quote from Jim Rohn, and it's geared towards people who are afraid of taking risk, right? And basically the quote says, life is already risky. Like, the minute you were born, your life got risky. There is no such thing as a life where you're going to be completely able to avoid risk and all of these negative things anyway. So you might as well take risks that are going to be conducive to you getting what you want out of life. There's the other perspective that, one of the ways to get over the fear of uncertainty is just to stop taking your life so freaking seriously. It's interesting, like when you're in the weeds of everything that's going on in your life, it's very difficult to get out of it. When you're in the weeds, in the thick of it, in the day-to-day of your existence, it's very hard to just zoom yourself out and have a bird's eye view of the way life works. I know that. But it's still good to think about it. It's like, you're on this floating rock in the middle of the sky, in the middle of nowhere. in the eyes of the universe, in the time scale of the universe, you're already dead. I watched a documentary one time that said, like, if the entire history of the universe was a roll of toilet paper, the times humans have been here is like one sheet out of that whole roll, right? So we haven't. You're not going to be here for that long. Nothing. It shouldn't be so bad. It shouldn't be so serious that you shouldn't go for what you want anyways. Your life is inherently risky just by the fact that you're alive, period. So you might as well go for it. And it's just something that comes over time, and it's like whatever outcome in your life, or whatever you're trying to pursue that has some uncertain element to it. Like there is no cure for getting over your fears other than to do whatever it is that you're afraid of. Ultimately, there is no amount of thinking about doing something that's gonna help you actually do it. Like thinking about doing something can get you to the edge, but you still kind of have to jump in the pool and do it. And you're not gonna learn anything about yourself until you go through the process. You're not gonna learn how to build a business without building a business. You're not gonna learn how to speak in front of a crowd if you're scared of speaking in front of a crowd without actually going to do it. A bunch of different examples like that, right? But one way to get there is just to like kind of just beat it in your head, like why am I taking this all so seriously? Why am I so worried about the future? Why am I so worried about what other people think about me? Why am I so worried about whether or not I'm going to fail? Why am I so worried about this resistance in my head? Like, I'm going to die soon. Wouldn't it be better to just go for what I want instead of like being unhappy? Like, it's crazy. It's crazy the lengths of misery people will go through just to maintain that sense of certainty and just to maintain that identity, right? It's very ego-based, very self-centered. You want to preserve your identity and your sense of self, even if that means your life has to suck. Because in your mind, the alternative of not knowing who you really are, of not really having a sense of self, of feeling like a fish out of water, of constantly feeling uncomfortable, it's just really hard to do it. So you'd rather just live and be a shell of yourself than to put yourself out there. And it's crazy when you look at the perspective of life. It's insane. But it might not be that insane since the vast majority of people are doing it. Maybe it is insane to be the one who's going out there and pushing yourself to your limits. But really, that's the way that you have to live if you really want to get the outcomes that you want. So those are a couple of quick things to think about. Again, going back to that quote, most people choose unhappiness over uncertainty. Pretty profound statements. Think about that in your life and think about what you can do to reverse that equation so you can start doing things with uncertain outcomes but end up happier in the long run. One thing I was very uncertain about many times in my life was putting together books and sharing them with the world. So I'm going to go ahead and shill some of my accomplishments, some of the outcomes of uncertainty that have benefited my life, and have words of wisdom that can help yours too. So go and grab a Real Help and Honest Guide to Self-Improvement. Teaches you everything that I know that I've put together in the past 5 years to learn how to change your life. So go and grab that. Link in the description everywhere that this video is being shot. Back on the grind shooting videos. I took about a solid month off. These things happen. I slipped up, but we're back on track and had a lot of fun doing this one. So I will see you on the next video.